everybody. Welcome back. We are so excited to be able to join you once again and chat with you about how much we love movies and how much you love movies. I am Devora Governale.
And I'm Carrie Parker.
And today we are doing one of those films that we just love so much that originally started out as a book. So I'm going to super quick give us just a little bit of background on the author of this book. And he is Roald Dahl. He lived from 1916 to 1990. I did not realize until I was looking him up that he wrote in pretty much every genre. I really was only familiar with his children's works, but he apparently wrote in like almost everything. So Alfred Hitchcock really loved him. Tim Burton loved him and did some of his works. Spielberg, Wes Anderson did. And then, of course, the one that we're doing today is Matilda. So Danny DeVito also took his works and turned it into a film. But yeah, we love him. In 61, he wrote James and the Giant Peach. 64 is when he wrote Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. 1970 is when he wrote The Fantastic Mr. Fox. In 1982 is when he wrote BFG, The Big Friendly Giant. 83, he wrote Witches. And then one of his very last pieces of work, published about 2 years before his passing, was Matilda. I am a huge fan of Matilda. It also not only has been translated into a film back in 1996, if you can believe it, we're at like 30 years. How did that happen? But it also has been translated into a stage musical. It opened in London, really fantastic reviews. I actually got to be the wardrobe supervisor for it at the Hale Center Theater. We did that show actually right at the kickoff of the pandemic. So that was, as a costumer, an interesting show to do, where you have all these kids and they're dancing and they fit their uniforms. And then we went away for 3 months and came back to finish the run, and no one fit their costumes anymore because they had outgrown them. But yes, love this show. He does have a few other screenplays he's done. He actually took Ian Fleming's novel and did You Only Live Twice. So he's actually done a 007 screenplay. I did not know that. Other fun fact I did not know, Ian Fleming is the original author of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. And then it was Roald Dahl who took the novel and turned it into the screenplay that we love, with Dick Van Dyke and all of the fantastic singing and dancing in that film. He technically wrote the screenplay for Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, but the studios kind of put their hands in it quite a bit and shifted things around. For him, writing for children was about a certain number of rules, and it needed to be about Charlie. His book was called Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and he was not very happy that they kind of flipped the tables and there was so much focus on Willy Wonka. So he actually kind of was known for like disowning it when they produced that film in 71. So just a few years after he wrote the book itself. One of my favorite tidbits about Roald Dahl is that when he wrote for children, he had 8 main rules. So the 8 rules that he applied to all children's books were: number 1, just add chocolate. Number 2, adults can be scary. Number 3, bad things can happen. Number 4, revenge is sweet. Number 5, keep a wicked sense of humor. Number 6, pick perfect pictures. Number 7, films are fun, but books are better. Like we talked about last week, I want to do a book to movie club at Maven. And number 8, food is fun. So he made sure to always incorporate those 8 rules whenever he was writing for children. It was really important for him to create stories that they could really dive into and feel like they were being represented. And I love that in this film, Matilda, we get to see a young lady who's got a really tough life because she's got a really horrible family. They're played by amazing, amazing performers. Danny DeVito directed it, narrated it, and then he also plays Matilda's dad. And his real life wife, Rhea Perlman, played the mom. I cannot, even with her costumes, they're just some of the most fun costumes I feel like I've seen in a film. With little Miss Mara Wilson, she actually was having a rough time when she was filming this film. Her mom was actually very sick. She was suffering through cancer. And even though Danny DeVito and Rhea Perlman were terrible parents on screen to her, they actually became like surrogate parents that really helped support her through that. So they had a really strong bonding time behind the scenes for making this film. And I love that BTS tidbit on this. So yes, Matilda. We love Matilda because she's
Yay.
read and it speaks so much about the power of the written word. So yes, I'm gonna kick it over to you.
I think it's amazing. Mara Wilson was literally like that kid for a while in the 90s. So the reality that she was Matilda, but she was also one of the daughters in Mrs. Doubtfire opposite Robin Williams, which just imprinted on everyone. I think that's why Robin Williams became surrogate dad for so many of us. Around that time frame, she was also in Miracle on 34th Street. So she literally just kind of was one of those child stars that we as girls related to. And she was adorable, yet she played that every girl character that most girls could identify with in one way or another. So, I think that's amazing that she got to experience that. Unfortunately, dealing with family at the same time, you and I know that like that's half the battle of choosing the arts is that the reality of the show must go on becomes a line that so many of us end up having to determine where exactly that line cuts, right? And where we feel like we're allowed to prioritize our lives and our families. And that became a big reason why, honestly, I stepped away from theater was just because I knew I wanted children. I knew I wanted things. And gig lifestyle, theater lifestyle was not it at the time. And so I think that's true of a lot of us that went through that same education and we were in that same stage of life. A lot became teachers. One of my friends became an accountant. Some got into events, working for foundations. We've all found different ways to try and keep that creative part of us alive, but in a more routine and structure where we're not constantly just going production to production to production. But I mean, you and I have friends, we know of people who have done the stage life and been able to also start families. And we'll talk to them someday. We'll bring them on about that reality of being an artist out there and how to also have a career. Something that probably is going to be a good conversation these days, for us to have. Because I was just rewatching it and my friend was here and Miss Honey says she pays $50 rent. And we were just both like, girl, can we pay $50 rent? I was like, wait, what decade was that made in? So it is really fun watching movies that are set in a previous time and looking at them and just if we only knew then what we know now about how good those times were.
The
But
good
the
old
other
days.
reality that you were saying about Roald Dahl, one of the great things about Roald Dahl is that he makes fables for the most part, especially his children's books. They are always fantastical, um, imaginative, creative. They're not typically in our world, so they're fairy tale in that way. Where they're in our world, but they're magical, so they cross that line. Which honestly, when Harry Potter came out, that intro where we meet the Dursleys, straight up Matilda vibes,
Yeah,
100%. And
Pugsley and
so the
Mikey, they could have been brothers.
Mhm.
They were so the same character. Yep.
Yep. And so that reality of what he influenced in storytelling and future authors, I think, is really important. I do I agree with what you were saying about Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I think that they kind of, because we did a musical version, right? We've done,
There's a musical of that one
yeah,
as well. And a musical of James and the Giant Peach. I actually have worked on all three of those musicals in the last like year and a half of my theater career.
and then we just had the ever popular Timothy Chalamet in the origin story of Wonka, which is
Yep.
also a musical and very tied back to their traditional original um, stage musical version of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. So I feel like Wonka as a character has just such great mass appeal. And I mean, we can't ever really get past Gene Wilder. You know what I mean? Like, unfortunately, even if they had tried to make it Charlie centric, is there any way to not have Gene Wilder pretty much hold his own and seem like it's about him? Because I think at best you would end up with a co-starring concept, but there's no way to really like make Willie be background catalyst to Charlie, right?
Yeah.
And I do appreciate how when we got to the Burton version, we were seeing that Charlie and Wonka had those catalyst traits for each other,
Yeah.
and that we saw both grow and realize things that they were doing wrong, they were in denial of, they were maybe avoiding. Um, I love how everyone always reacts to Grandpa Joe. So, but I love how that is Roald Dahl in every single way. And I feel like in the beginning of Harry Potter, we got a lot of that with our character build. We got a lot of very similar whimsical character build. And that's really what I think his legacy was. But Matilda, the musical, which you mentioned, written by Tim Minchin, is one of my favorites. I was really, really excited when I found out that he was writing that musical. But I'm not gonna lie, I've never seen it yet. I'm real
Oh,
sorry. I
it
bought the
was
soundtrack.
phenomenal. That was one of
Yeah.
those shows I was so glad to be wardrobe supervisor because it meant I was backstage every single night for every single performance. And there were some like wicked quick changes that we had in it. So I feel like I was just always like right there. I have some really fun like BTS video of like the two men who played Trunchbull and a couple of the two girls who played Matilda, just having a grand old time backstage, which is of course funny when they're on stage and they're pitted against each other so much. But gosh, it is very good. It is very, very good. And the Netflix one will do it for you, other than missing out on Loud. You can totally watch that one. And Emma Thompson as Trunchbull is just, oh gosh, she's
Emma
so.
Thompson is such a babe. Like I honestly, she is a legitimate queen and hero. There's no way around it. But we'll have maybe for Women's History Month, we'll do that. We'll do an Emma Thompson episode because dear goodness, she is probably one of the original girl crushes, but in the most like aspiring to be emulating way, but she's also gorgeous, but just the amount of talent. Miss Honey also has a great resume. She was in Army of Darkness. Like she has been working, girl. She has been working. My favorite though, that honestly I remember her most from is an adaptation of Mansfield Park that Johnny Lee Miller's in and
Okay.
absolutely adore it.
I love that as we're getting the character intro for Matilda, there really is this message of the power of the written word, which I think is so great to get that from Roald Dahl at the very end of his career and his life. That was the art form that he put into the world, and that was the passion that he clearly had, and the great talent he obviously possessed. So I feel like to get that embodied in this story is so great. When we did the stage version, we had giant books all over the stage, just that idea of the power of the written word. And you've got this little girl who is like leaps and bounds, like off the intelligence charts, writing her own name in the baby food as a toddler. And then as what did they say? I think 4 years old, walking to the library by herself because she has these neglectful parents that are just leaving her at home at 4 years old. So crazy. Um, but I love we've got this scene where she learns she can check the books out. So she starts to pull this little red wagon, and the art department always so strategically places these perfect book covers and these perfect titles. You're seeing Tom Sawyer and you're seeing Charles Dickens and you're seeing Shakespeare's sonnets. And we're getting that narration from Danny DeVito as we're seeing this. And I love, he's got two lines during that little character intro we get from her. He says, her mind continued to grow, nurtured by the voices of all those authors who had sent their books out into the world like ships onto the sea. And I wanted to look it up if that was actually directly from Roald Dahl, because it just is written so eloquently. It feels like it could be, but I'm so sorry if that was you, scriptwriter. It was beautiful. And then he kind of ends that character intro moment in the beginning by saying that books gave her this hopeful message of comfort, which was, you are not alone. And that I feel like is one, there's lots of powerful moments in this story, of course, but right there in the beginning, I feel like is one of the most powerful moments that we get to see this little girl who's having a childhood that she really should not be having. Honey makes sure the second half of childhood is amazing, but the first half, not so much. But that these books were able to give her that message that you are not alone. And I imagine that that has been true both from books and film and even musicians and other types of art forms for so many across the world for decades. So I love that Matilda gets to portray that in this film. But yeah, yeah.
And even if it's not a direct quote out of the book, it's a great ode to Dahl, and I love how they keep making a reference to Herman Melville and Moby Dick, because when she tells Daddy, I'm reading Moby Dick, and he's like, Moby what? And that's exactly that's exactly what it feels like to be a human out here sometimes, right? Is like the misinterpretation, and people just love to snap judge. And but I mean, the reality of a legacy of a writer, that's what it is to genuinely help people escape, but also, and to not feel alone, but to also feel that higher purpose and that connectivity, right? The idea that authors and storytellers, artists in every medium, they're expressing the human experience in a different format, right? But it's the human experience. And so, despite how we try to avoid repeating history, we end up doing it, but we end up doing it because humans are humans. And that's not going to end. But now the question is, how do we get to that next better step? And I honestly think that storytelling, art, and creativity are the answer. The answer lies within it. And I feel like that's why storytellers do it. I mean, he didn't have to write these books. He didn't have to write hope for children, which is essentially what he did with James and the Giant Peach and Matilda and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And um, but he did, and he creates such a great visual growth and metaphor for that change that it does seem really dire in the beginning, right? It's that miserable, but in this one, he's also empowering children, that children hold value and worth, and that children are special and important. And that's so very important, um, especially not to tie back to our January is Human Trafficking and Slavery Prevention Month, but hi, welcome. So the idea that giving each of the children an individual power is exactly how we avoid those things, right? It's when we make humans feel like they're not special, they're not important, they're pretty much like cattle or sheep, they're just part of a herd. They're one of many, they're replaceable. That's when we have struggles in this world. And so I love that Miss Honey was the antithesis. But also, did we ever find out why Agatha hated children so much?
She makes the
Why
comment
she
that she's so
resented
glad
them?
she never, yeah, she says she's so glad she never was one. She has that sentence. In the musical, the story that we hear from Miss Honey, we actually hear from the librarian. The librarian has a bigger role in the musical. And so Honey doesn't tell Matilda her story. It's actually the librarian. And it's a much bigger, elaborate thing where they are circus performers and it is a whole thing. But still, Agatha is the reason why they come to their death. It is her fault. I can't remember if she can't have kids herself. She just straight up just hated him. If she just hated seeing her brother happy with his wife and her niece. But yeah, she does make that comment. I'm glad I've never been one, which I feel like does say so. It like speaks volumes of her character. Trunchbull's character intro, cinematography wise, is brilliant because we first see her just as a silhouette shadow. And then once we get to the schoolyard, we just get some real quick close ups of her accessories. We see the fingerless leather gloves. We see the belt buckle with the teeth on it. We see her tall, ridiculous gym socks. And then we just catch some, they move to some wide angles and we catch some shots from behind. So we see the broad shoulders and the military uniform. And then the whole rest of the film, it's like they just put that camera like right in her face. So you have lots and lots of low angles looking up at her. So it's like us as the audience feel like the children being intimidated by that height that she has. Lots of speed zooms into her face and then a lot of close-ups of her face. And I feel that they made that choice very consciously so that we could really feel that intimidation from the child's point of view. But yeah, she is crazy. You shouldn't teach hate and you shouldn't necessarily always teach revenge, even though that was one of his rules. Revenge is sweet. But man, she is a character who deserves what she gets in the end. She just is. She just super deserves what she gets. She would have been arrested a million times over by today's educational standards. For the woes that we are still working on, we have at least made progress in those ways. A
Yeah.
teacher couldn't be like Miss Trunchbull today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as someone who works with DCF on the regular, yes, I understand that one. We have made great strides. But it does seem more chaotic than not, which is a whole nother conversation for another time. But so I was going to ask you, because this was a 90s film, what is the first movie that you remember Danny DeVito from?
Actually, I don't think it's a movie I remember him from. I think I remember him from Nick at Night watching Taxi with my mom. And then, of course, his wife was in Cheers, which I think I watched more episodes of Cheers than of Taxi. I am pretty sure. Because I remember, like, that's when you met, like, Tony Danza. And it was also, like,
Mm-hmm.
Christopher Lloyd. So I feel like when Batman Returns came out, I remember thinking, oh, there's that guy from that
Right.
show. And of course, he's in like all of this great makeup and everything that they did costume wise and prosthetics and everything. Um, but I think if you're sticking to movie, I think it was Batman Begins. But I remember
Returns.
when he was in Twins. Sorry, yes, Returns. Those are two totally different films. I
Yeah.
remember him being in Twins with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I
I feel like that is after Batman. I think that's 2 or 3 or 4 years after Batman. I feel like I saw him on a lot of things. Like he didn't feel like someone that I hadn't seen and stuff before, even though I can only remember those four titles I just said loud for that
And
whole
that's what I
decade.
think is so very interesting about Danny DeVito. And I love watching the younger generations, where he's come to fame because of Always Sunny. And so the reality that he's become almost like a mascot for just being an individual and original and not like engaging in some of the societal, you have to do this. It's okay to be a little weird. I love that he is still that person for us because the reality is that Danny DeVito, like twins, the whole joke in that is the fact he is not tall, right?
He's literally the exact opposite of Arnold
You're
Schwarzenegger.
right.
The
He is the
exact opposite.
opposite, hence the humor in the irony in twins, and it's but that was our whole entire existence was we were raised in that time. I mean, I was like not yet. Let's see. Matilda, I was 13. Get Shorty happened before then. Oh wow. Junior happened. Speaking of
That's
Emma
right, Junior. I do
Thompson. Oh
remember
my
Junior. That
gosh.
was weird. That one was
That
weird.
That's so adorable. That one's a good question is like where, because honestly, Batman Returns was probably it because that was 92. And I feel like, yes, I was aware Twins was 88. Maybe it was Twins.
Oh, Twins was 88. So it must be what I knew him from. I don't know that I watched it, but I do remember the trailer, seeing the trailer on TV, during commercial breaks. Because it,
Yeah,
like you said, it was the irony. It like stuck in your brain because it was just so funny to see these two actors together and have them call themselves twins. It was like, ha ha ha, that is hysterical. But if I saw
yes.
it, it would have been way back when, and I probably only saw it once, so I don't remember. And he was in Junior.
Taxi was from
Also,
78 to 83.
yeah, I was gonna say late 70s, early 80s, and he was in Junior. Is that also Arnold
Yeah.
Schwarzenegger? Isn't Junior the one where
Yes.
Arnold like gets pregnant, like
Is
they do a
pregnant.
science experiment? Yeah, that one I saw, and that one was weird. That one was weird.
Hi. Hi, welcome to the weird borderline, like not, a little crazy, silly, absurd comedy from the 80s. That is what we grew up with. But
Yeah,
I also, so War of the Roses, he directed and he was in it, which they just did a remake with
isn't that
Benedict
Benedict Cumberbatch?
Cumberbatch.
I saw
Yeah,
the
and
remake.
it's
Yeah, I saw
it
that
was
in
so
theaters.
funny because they didn't title it the exact same, but it's like
Yeah,
as an 80s kid, I'm like, oh, I know what they're doing. Like, that's adorable, you guys. That was
that's
clever. I like it. I appreciate it. Um, but yeah, because he actually directed that one. Because I looked back to see how many movies he had directed, or if Matilda was one of the first. It wasn't one of the first, but War of the Roses was one of the director credits he has. And so I just, that element alone of who we are as multicultural creatures, including our generation, and how these actors have been staples in our lives and existences, and the fact that Danny DeVito, while not necessarily dad, although Matilda kind of put him close to that dad role, um, but he had been present in our life in so many ways. And like, but Batman Returns probably was it because I remember like actually kind of being sad in the end. You know what I mean? It's like I didn't hate the Penguin. I actually kind of like the Penguin, and it's because it was Danny DeVito. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have cared, but he did such a good job. He owns who he is. And that's how he's been able to be the staple in Hollywood is just understanding types, archetypes, um, and being
really
able to
interesting.
work within them and understand that you're going to have people who try to tell you, no, you can't do this and no, you can't do that because of your type. But again, our comedians always love pushing those boundaries, and he is definitely one of our comedians. So grateful for him. And yeah, that's my question for this one is what do you most remember Danny DeVito from? Because Mara Wilson, I feel like that one's hard because I do remember her just as much from Ms. Doubtfire. That
Yeah,
Matilda, it was her starring role, but Mrs. Doubtfire, she was so like, man, she broke my heart, giving Daddy the big like puppy dog eyes about him not being home and if she hadn't been there, I who knows if we would have cared as much if he got back to his kids, but we cared so hard that he got back to his kids, especially her. So,
I definitely watched Mrs. Doubtfire hands down the most of those three. I saw Miracle. I definitely saw Matilda, but I feel like I only watched it a couple times for whatever
yeah.
reason. But Mrs. Doubtfire, also Mrs. Doubtfire was released right around the year my parents got divorced. So, like with Santa Claus, it was a film where I felt represented and seeing the dad trying so hard and all of that.
Yep.
The mom being protective and all of
Yep.
that. So I felt a connection to that film because I was having that experience at that time. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely is relatable. My situation was a little different, but divorce as a concept and that reality of like your parents aren't in the same home, that one, it's hard no matter who you are. And I was glad for the representation on that one. But yeah, so Matilda, it's so cute because the ending, I was just rewatching it and she's like, I've got the adoption papers right here. And I was like, oh, that's not how that works. But That's me as a mental health professional knowing that that's not how that works anymore. But, they did it for the cute bow on the end of the movie and be like,
Yeah,
yay, everyone lives happily ever
you
after.
get to
And
pretend everything's legal instead of them just driving off in the car and being like, "Oh,
yeah,
that's
without a
just
notary or
people
even
a
like,
word
yeah.
later." Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you get to at least like suspension of disbelief. That's legal and legit. They're all said
Yeah,
because it's
that's totally
storytelling
fine.
too.
It's totally,
Yeah,
totally great. So
suspension of disbelief, which obviously in a
nobody
film
will
like this,
question
we
that.
have to have a lot of suspension of disbelief because the way that the way she's able to overcome her adversity is through the power of telekinesis that she's able to develop, which the narration, Danny DeVito as a narrator says, we only use a little portion of our brain. And we've seen that used as a film storytelling device in the past. We see it in Lucy that Scarlett Johansson plays. We've seen it with Limitless. I forget who that is, Bradley Cooper, whoever's in that.
Bradley Cooper,
Um,
yeah.
Thank you. All of a sudden, I second guessed myself. I was like, wait, is it Jake Gyllenhaal? But yeah, so that idea of,
Dude, don't
oh,
tease me with a good time.
all right, let's put them both in there, and then it'd be so great. But
Yeah.
but yeah, so that idea that we only use 10% of our brain, and of course, the neuroscience that we've been able to learn over the last decade or so, we have learned that that's not actually true. That's something we believed for a long time, but we actually do use 100% of our brain. There's certainly parts of our brain that get used less frequently than others. But to see scans of the brain over the course of 24 hours, pretty much your full brain gets used at some point in time or another during the day, whether you're asleep or awake. But it's still fun, especially from the kid's point of view, when you can feel so powerless to get that power, where she's able to, get this teacher off her back, basically. But I also
Mm-hmm.
do appreciate that those are not the only scenes where we see her show her power. The whole Bruce has to eat the chocolate cake scene is, a great sign of power that anyone could do, where she's the only person at first that stands up in the middle of the whole crowd and she just cheers him on. And that's how he's able to finish the cake. And that positivity becomes infectious. And then more and more students across the audience stand up and, yeah, Bruce, you can do it. And so I do appreciate that you also get very real world examples of how she can be a hero that we could apply literally any day of our lives of, yep, infuse some positivity, be a cheerleader for somebody, help people out. And that's what's great about her character, is that even though she gets pushed down so much, she still keeps just trying to lift people up and have their back and not rat out her friends and cover for them and all the things that she does, that just shows she's just a fantastically great person that we can emulate, even if we don't have telekinesis.
Well, and I think that's part of the interesting, like, maybe that is why I didn't watch it as much. The idea that she retaliates or she gets revenge, she's like, somebody's got to teach them a lesson. It's
Yeah,
slightly problematic. Like watching it now, I'm like, maybe that's why it was never a favorite and I didn't like rewatch it all the time. But I think also because it's not realistic. Unfortunately, we are more often than not going to be able to witness the karma or the retaliation or the consequences that those who are making certain choices will get. Um, and it sucks, but we don't typically get to be the source of that karma for them.
no,
And so that one was a little like, okay, I don't know how I feel about that one, but
yeah,
I do like that she's essentially as a child identifying the fact that there
it's
aren't
not a favorite to
necessarily
happen.
instantaneous repercussions, but then at the same time, she's like, those aren't boat salesmen, those are cops. And mom's like, no, they're boat salesmen. See, I have a toy boat in my hands. It's like, cool. So, yeah, I mean, she
Pee-wee
is more
Herman.
aware in a lot of ways, and it's definitely, it's that dichotomy. and that reality of sometimes you are going to be smarter than adults around you. And that one's been true. I've had to counsel children through that one and be like, sometimes you're going to know and they're not going to know. And that one sucks. But until you're 18, you're kind of stuck where you are. And so, like, I've
Well,
definitely been there
and you
with
can
kids who
actually
are
even
very
feel it,
clever.
yeah, as an adult, whether it's you're an employee and it's your employer that's maybe behaving in a way that's not super professional. I thought that watching those parts of the film as she was like, this isn't okay. Something has to be done. I sat there thinking, gosh, I feel like that's when I've gotten in some of the biggest trouble of my life, when I just see someone getting wronged and I just have this like complex of I have to make it better for them. It's not right that that's happening to them. And I've gotten in more trouble from being that human than just being like, okay, I have to just take a step back and let it run its course and be professional myself. And my heavens, the whole like this wrong has to be righted. Oh my gosh, that's gotten me in a lot of trouble in my adult life for sure. But
Hi,
I
babe.
do appreciate that the counter to that we do get from Miss Honey, that she does like right at Matilda, and she says, having power isn't nearly as important as what you choose to do with it. So I do appreciate that they put that line in there. So we've got Matilda being very like, this has to be, corrected, but you've got Miss Honey who's like, the power, that's fun and great, but what you choose to do, that's your real power. That's the real thing, is the choice that you make with it. I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
And babe, I feel like that's why you and I are best friends and we have such similar values in the world because you are not wrong. We are both that person that when we see things that we're like, this ain't right, if we can't fight it, we're gonna try our best not to let it spread, right? We're gonna at least say, what can I do within my abilities and my power? And as you know, I've made those choices before, and it's not easy. And what you face when you make them is not easy. And the way people will try to convince you that you're wrong or convince you that, well, that's just how the world works, is
Yeah.
it's painful. It's painful going up against the status quo and acknowledging, but it shouldn't be this way. And I'm not going to be one of the people who just allows it to occur. So, but again, those are our lines as humans. When we see a certain injustice and we go, no, that one literally like makes the gears in my head go to a stop, and like that's that's not what I've been told the world is. And if
Yeah.
that's how the world is, then cool. Now I'm gonna change it.
Fighting for what's right and fighting for the little guy. Yeah, painful is the right word. That is the right word.
Fighting when you see cycles and patterns that turn into cycles and just repeat and repeat and repeat. And people want to act like we are making change in the world, but we're not. We're feeding a cycle that's repeating itself and literally is broken. But sure, if you want to pretend you're doing something different or helpful in the world, you go for it. But I'm not gonna enable you to think that you're actually doing something positive in the world because I'm gonna go do the actual positive thing in the world. Yay for Matilda.
Yep. Yay for Roald Dahl writing it. Yay for Danny
Yes.
DeVito directing it and starring in it with all those other fabulous cast members. I had a second where I thought her brother was the same kid that what's his name? Sam Nielsen scares with the raptor claw at the beginning of Jurassic Park. I had to look it up. I was like, oh, no, those two kids just look ridiculously similar in a film that was filmed only 3 years apart. But they're not the same actor. They're just clearly each other's doppelganger. But yeah, great cast, great story, great film. Did really good job with the blend of practical effects and special effects for what the era was. It also had me reminiscing on my musical live version of it. Some of those practical effects are challenging in real life when you don't have movie magic. I still have a video of my little niece in the harness while we did the test in the costume shop, so we could try to do the effect of Trunchbull picking the girl up by the braids and flinging her across the stage. We had a whole little practical effect to try to make that work in our space, and my niece was just the right size to test the harness. And so it's fun to go back and reflect on creating, the magical elements of this story. But I appreciate the magic it puts in the world, and the way that you get to, like you said, feel represented, whether you're a kid or whether you're a big kid, and be inspired to put good in the world the same way that Matilda did.
Yay for
Cool.
Roald Dahl writing strong female characters.
Yes, hooray for that for sure. The whole point is we want to encourage ourselves and others to just keep watching great movies and go read great books too.
Right, exactly. Understand where these stories are coming from, and that we have great storytellers, and especially once film became a medium, they started crossing those lines, right? A lot of them, even playwrights, they would go back and forth between writing plays, screenplays, novels, etc., whatever they could, essentially to keep a job, keep an income
Yeah,
coming,
we're
right?
all trying to work as starving artists.
Yeah. So, but yes, we are grateful for Roald Dahl's existence in the world because he did such a great job pointing out certain traits or values that would turn people's behaviors into what we see. And he role models it so that we see that metaphorical version and go, okay, I understand how to identify people who aren't nice or aren't prioritizing other people. They're not kind. And that's what I think is important and valuable is that he always made it very clear.
Well, thank you again for joining us. We're so excited every time we get to dive in and be able to dissect some of these stories and the storytellers that told them, and everyone who got to be involved. It's such a collaborative craft, and we love being able to geek out about it so much. We'd love to hear your thoughts on Matilda and any of his other stories. And we're so excited to be able to bring more to you in the coming weeks.
Thank you guys so much. Sorry for the super red Rudolph nose and fun congested voice, but we're here because this show must go on. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.